Business mogul Elon Musk recently hosted a Tesla Battery Day event, and he made a very interesting comment. Please mine more nickel. One gentleman answering that call is Mark Selby, Chairman and CEO of Canada Nickel Company and founder of Net Zero Metals. So let's dig in now with Mark. Hello, Mark. Welcome to The Dig.
Hey, great to be here, and thanks for taking the time to hear our story.
Yeah, excellent. So can you, first of all, start off with giving us a little history on the formation of Canada Nickel?
Yeah, this is a brand new company with a brand new nickel sulphide discovery. We founded the company privately just over a year ago. We acquired the asset at that time, raised $6 million privately. At the end of that time period, we took it public at the end of February, and we put out our first initial resource where we developed what was one of the 12 largest nickel sulphide resources on less than 20% of the project explored to date. And we started trading at that point in time. You know, obviously with COVID out there, we're still, there's a lot of we've done very, very well, but there's a lot of investors who still haven't heard the story yet.
Right. So, yeah, so tell us a little bit about the key asset there. I guess it's the Crawford Deposit.
Yeah. So this is a very rare commodity, which is a brand new nickel sulphide discovery. Historically, we've got about one or two large scale sulphide discoveries per decade. And because they're a scarce commodity, they tend to trade out at a very high premium. So this is a large low grade deposit. In my past life at RNC Minerals, we took Dumont from an early stage resource to a fully permitted construction ready project. We believe we've got a bigger, better Dumont sitting just north of Timmins, all that infrastructure in place. And as I said, we've already, from the resource at the end of February, turned it into one of the 12 largest sulphide resources globally. We're about to put out a new resource update out here in the next few weeks here, which will step it up even larger. And again, more importantly, focus on the higher grade core that runs down the center of the ore body, which is going to be, key to really having a great set of project economics, which we hope to publish in a PEA by the end of the year.
Right. And speaking to infrastructure, like this thing is literally underneath the highway. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Literally, if you head up 655 from Timmins north towards Cochrane, about 15 minutes out of town, you go past the Kidd Creek mine. Another 15 minutes outside of town is where the deposit is. The initial resource was just to the right of the highway. We're now drilling, effectively underneath the highway, and it'll continues in and around the highway for several kilometers on either side. We're also picked up 7 other option property or targets in the area, and again, all of them are very close to infrastructure. So, from being able to build a large-scale mining operation, having all that infrastructure in place is a massive bonus.
Yeah, it's kind of a dream come true to have a highway plus hydroelectric power at the source of your discovery. It's kind of a real perfect storm, if you will.
Our problem will be we'll have to move the infrastructure a little bit out of the way at some point to keep mining. Unfortunately, we won't have to do that right out of the gate, which is
and Timmins no stranger to that. Having that happen, right? So
oh yeah, no, there's several mines literally in town. So
yeah, correct. So you mentioned it in terms of low grades. So it sounds like there's going to be quite a bit of throughput. What are you expecting?
Yeah, so this, for investors who are probably more familiar with, the way to think about it would be the larger scale low grade gold operations. That Osisko's it's done very successfully with Malartic and then with Detour with their project. And now you've got IM Gold building Côté Gold just to the southwest of Timmins. So, you would be looking somewhere in the range of probably 40,000 tons a day. So just slightly smaller than where they're starting up. And then depending on the resource basis there, hopefully operating at a multiple of that scale. We believe what we have will ultimately turn into, one of Canada's largest base metal operations. It's a very, very fortunate place to be. And in terms of operating costs, if investors are looking at this and want to understand a little better, is if you look at the large scale low grade porphyries in BC, so companies like Copper Mountains, that mine, Mount Milligan, Taseko's Gibraltar operation, that's the kind of, order of magnitude scale of mining that we're going to be looking at. So, roughly those mines operate at $7 to $10 a ton. And your mining material, that's $20 plus margins. And so, you can easily generate 50 to 60% operating margins, even with that kind of a grade. So, that's the math. You just have to build these mines at the right scale, and you can turn them into very profitable operations.
Right, right. And you just recently closed the first tranche of what, $13 million, was it?
Yeah. So we've been moving this project ahead relatively quickly. So literally, this is not like it was an old deposit that had been sitting around for years. The first 4 holes into this zone were drilled in late 18. We started our drilling in a year ago with $6 million. We raised another $4 million during COVID to get us to here and towards the PEA. And with this financing that we just completed, this will allow us to go full steam ahead into a feasibility study, which we expect to complete by the end of 2021. So literally from first drilling to feasibility study in just over 2 years. So I think that's about just as fast as you can do a greenfield discovery. So
certainly, yeah. So a lot more drilling and assaying to come down the pipe for this project.
Yeah, for sure, most definitely.
Yeah. So one of the comments, of course, we can't have this interview without talking about Elon Musk mentioning, mine more nickel and environmentally friendly way. And you made the comment of a net zero mine. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so that was something we were working on for the bulk of the year. Again, in my past life with the Dumont project, it shares very similar characteristics. So, we're in a very fortunate position that, literally the mineral that makes up about 90% of what it is we're mining is a series of serpentine minerals. That serpentine rock, when exposed to air, naturally absorbs CO2. It'll have we will, basically offset a certain amount of CO2. The other big plus in a sulphide operation like ours, the bulk of where you get carbon emissions created is when you have to generate power. In our case, we're adjacent to, as you said earlier, a bunch of hydroelectric generating stations and power lines nearby. And then the third part, Timmins is actually quite comfortable with downstream processing. So we've got the potential to actually set up some downstream processing plants, route the off gas back into our tailings and capture it that way. So, we wouldn't have said it if we didn't think that we could credibly get there. And so, we're pretty confident that as we, move through the engineering on that we'll be able to deliver a truly net zero nickel and a net zero cobalt and a net zero iron product from the mine. Wow.
And so part of this kind of evolution, you've formed a subsidiary basically called Net Zero Metals. Is that it?
Yeah. Yeah. And effectively that'll be the it's 100% owned by us right now, but that will be the entity that'll have the offtake and look to have the downstream. In past discussions with various members of the EV and battery production chain, it's very clear they want access to offtake, but they don't necessarily want exposure to mining risk. So having this separate vehicle that you can bring those types of investors into, makes a lot of sense for them and it makes a lot of sense for us. So that's why we've gone ahead and set it up already at this point.
That's interesting. And when we're talking about technologies, are this technology that you've, are you in the development phase of how you're going to do this, or is this something that you've, it's tried and true?
In terms of, we don't need to measure for our specific rocks what that CO2 uptake is, but there's been a bunch of research work done on using this type of minerals and its ability to sequester a certain amount of CO2. The one piece of engineering that'll be have to work on is, if we're taking downstream process plant off gases and using the tailings to absorb them, sort of how do we manage that? That process is something we have to work through. But other than that, we're pretty confident in terms of being able to, the rest of the stuff is just taking existing technology and just taking advantage of it.
Right. And when you compare this overall process that you're talking about, I'm thinking of like the laterite deposits and Indonesia and stuff. And it sounds like it's a totally different carbon footprint.
Yeah. Oh no, that's a big, that's part of the reason, Elon Musk, had a bunch of phrases in that his quarterly presentation a few months ago. and one of them was environmentally friendly and environmentally sensitive way, and it's really highlighting the fact that, there's a lot of nickel production that comes with a very big carbon footprint. So, more than 100% of the supply growth in nickel over the last 5 years has come from nickel pig iron production in Indonesia. A big chunk of the growth going forward is also going to come from that, but you need a lot of electricity to melt laterite ore to make nickel pig iron, and these deposits are in places where they're, the only energy source really is coal-fired power. So they're burning 25 to 30 tons of coal per ton of nickel. And so, that generates 85 to 90 tons of CO2 per ton of nickel. So obviously that's not the kind of nickel Elon Musk had in mind when he was hoping to revolutionize the world and make it a cleaner place.
Right. So, and he also talked about how they're wanting to get off cobalt. Where do you see cobalt as a future, I guess, short, medium, long term in this whole battery world?
Yeah, so cobalt as a metal is going to have a tough row here for the next. There was EV was obviously a big source of growth going forward, and then if you take a look at the rest of its uses, so one is lithium cobalt batteries are the dominant battery chemistry for use in cell phones and small mobile devices, but another big chunk of cobalt uses in alloys that are unfortunately used in the oil and gas industry, as well as the aerospace industry. So both of those industries have taken a big kick in the teeth. So when you now layer on the fact that, people were talking about the transition from, batteries that were 1/3 nickel, 1/3 cobalt, 1/3 manganese to ones that were 80 to 90% nickel. 2 years ago, if you asked most market commentators, they said, that transition would take until 2024, 2025. We will be there large. We've already made the transition to 50 to 60% nickel batteries by and large already. And we'll be transitioning to 80 to 90% within the next, sort of 18 to 24 months. So it's happened. That huge spike in cobalt prices, caused the industry to engineer it out pretty quickly. The nice thing is for nickel, Tesla made it very clear in their battery day presentation, that their future is, they don't have enough nickel to do everything they want. So they're going to use lithium iron phosphate in sort of cheap and low range vehicles. They're going to use a nickel manganese battery that has very little to zero cobalt for their mid-range batteries. And then they're going to use these 80 to 90% nickel batteries, using the latest battery technology for things like their high-end cars. They have semi trucks that they're doing as well as the pickup trucks. So, again, it's important to think of when you think about batteries and EVs, it's not just cars, but there's a whole bunch of other transportation sectors that are becoming electrified.
Right. Well, and Elon Musk, as much as he can make some grandiose statements, he seems to always defy the naysayers and comes through. So It's always great to see someone like that speak of mining and how it can have a positive impact on us. And it sounds like your project. So,
most definitely. And that's the part, they put a stake in the ground to, produce 3 terawatts of battery capacity each year. Again, that's not going to be all nickel, but, if you make some assumptions about what that mix looks like, just Tesla alone for its own battery production. And again, remember, they say they're going to keep buying batteries from other people as well. But just their own battery production by 2030, they're going to need 1 to 1.5 million tons of nickel, and that's versus a nickel market today of 2.5 million tons. So,
wow.
Yeah.
There's the math.
Yeah. So when you hear Tesla talking to people, Tesla is talking to everybody that has some sort of nickel project, because, they are going to need lots of nickel in the future, and they have a whole team dedicated towards it. So, they're going to do as much as they can to make sure they lock up as much nickel supply as they can, for that future demand that's coming down the pipe.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like you're well positioned for that potential opportunity, and it's been a real pleasure to have you on the dig here. Thank you for taking the time, and I'll leave it. Do you have any final last words you'd like to share, or?
No. I think you did a great job. Those are excellent questions, and I think there's a huge amount of potential in nickel coming down through the next decade here. We have a big super cycle every 15 to 20 years, the late 60s, late 80s. mid 2000s, and it kind of feels like we're shaping up for one for the mid 2020s. So fingers crossed, we'll see what happens.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for being on The Dig. Take care.
Take care.
And thank you for joining us on The Dig. But before we go, here's Stephanie to share some important information with us.
Thanks, Ryan. Our Compendium 2021 is a very special edition as it marks the 40th anniversary of MSTA Canada. And I would like to invite all of our members, new and existing members, to join us for this very special edition. For more information, you can contact Linda Collins at collins@mstacanada.ca. Also, for all of those mining suppliers who are not yet members of MSTA Canada and would like to be part of this very special edition, as well as taking advantage of all of our benefits, you can contact membership at mstacanada.ca. And last but not least, I would like for everybody to save the date for our annual forum. Registrations will be opening very soon, and you will be receiving an email from me with a link where you can register immediately. Any questions about the annual forum, you can email me at alvarez@mstacanada.ca. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm Ryan McEachern. Take care and stay safe.